What's up, guys? So I'm going to break down the exact image ad testing strategy that we use for example, this brand owner that scaled to consistent $20,000 a day right now, right? So MRR offer, absolutely insane case study. Basically, almost very soon we'll be hitting $1 million months. And yeah, it's very different things that get you from 0 to 1. It's very different things that get you from 1 to 10. And it's also very different things that, really just happen all the way throughout every brand's e-com journey. And so it's very unique. And usually it's like the same process going from around like 0 to 2 to 3K days, but anything beyond that, usually brands scale with very individual things. So what this is supposed to be, this video is going to be an SOP. This video is going to be a breakdown of how we do things in-house, how we train strategists and, for example, media buyers to understand the audit and the process. And this is kind of what we're trying to, do, because now that you have this piece of information with this video, you're never going to struggle with information and the actual strategies ever again. It's just really just going to be an execution thing. Okay. So basically when it comes to, actually doing ads, especially image ads, what we're usually focusing on is we're trying to isolate everything. But before we do so, we are trying to do everything when it comes to research. Okay. So there's a couple of very specific steps where, what type of research you do, who does that in your team, and how to really go from there. So we usually start with the creative strategy research. By the way, these two things here, these two sections are going to be competitor-based research. So we're mostly going to sit in some ad spy tool or mostly honestly in the ads library and really just break down competitors. Okay. And there's two different types of spreadsheets that we basically fill out. One of them is more of like a creative strategy type of research. And then the other one is actually more of a production research. So for the production team, and so the actual editing and design behind it, for example. Okay, so what we're going to look at on the more of the creative strategy side of research is we're going to look at the competitor ads that we're kind of breaking down, and we're going to look at their avatars, their angles, their concepts, and everything of really just on the surface level, everything that comes down to kind of like, okay, what is the high impact stuff, what is the copywriting stuff, what awareness stage stuff. Okay, so all this marketing stuff, all this surface level thing, really just in this spreadsheet. And the point of this spreadsheet is going to be so that we have an overall understanding of which direction to write into. And then therefore, so we can kind of then get really specific with the details and make everything as good as possible, we're going to then also do the production team research, the production spreadsheet or whatever, which is going to, for example, include things, variables like the hook length, the hook awareness level and awareness stage, the ad length, and so stuff like this, which is really powerful. Why is this powerful? Well, because if you look at these things, the very small details, obviously they're not super high impact tests, but they're very, very powerful to iterate on, because these things will actually matter when it comes to getting those small percent improvements that we're then looking for to get brands to from really high numbers to even higher numbers. Okay, this is obviously less relevant to you if you're just starting out, or for example don't even have a specific it's a consistent level of new customers, and then I have pretty much other constraints in the business. Again, this is just an SOP. Marketing and advertising is just one part of the business, and never keep forgetting that. It doesn't matter what guru tells you. Okay, now then we obviously have the ad account audit, which is a big part of it. And this is actually done by someone else than these two things. Usually these two things are done by the creative strategist. And whenever we onboard a creative strategist, first thing we tell them is you're going to spend 70% of your time basically doing research, right? Because that is the most productive thing that a strategist can do properly, is actually to get a deeper understanding, constantly update the spreadsheets, and really just be active when it comes to research, and do that even in his free time, for example. And then we have the ad account audit, which is going to be done by the media buyer or the data analyst, however you've structured your team. Now obviously, once again, if you're kind of like a beginner watching this video, you're going to do all this stuff yourself, but don't worry, you're not going to do it forever. Okay, this is just the initial phase, finding the product market fit. You're going to do these things yourself. Again, this is just how you can get from 0 to 1. Now when you do this ad account audit, or where your media buyer does this ad account audit, you're going to look, obviously like the name says, into your own ad account and basically find out what variables have worked for you. So this is even more powerful than the competitor research. Why? Because obviously this is stuff that we already have bought data on. Media buying is nothing else than buying metrics. And so what we're doing then is we're manipulating those metrics by retesting specifically the things that we basically want to change up, and keeping the things that we want to keep. And that is obviously how kind of the iteration process works on like a, very surface level. So what we're going to look at is we're going to look at past winning hooks. We're going to look at concepts that have been working, for example, also the stuff tied to it, which is the ad length, and if it's like more of a experience based, more influencer based, UGC based concept, or like a super educational salesy type of concept, doesn't really matter, right? Then what type of language have you used? Have you used like very simple, easy language with swear words, or have we actually tried to resonate with a lot very professional, older audiences, more calmer voices, and really high level language? Whatever we do there, these are things that you kind of optimize at a high scale. And also the customer knowledge. So this is a huge thing. Obviously, people don't really understand their avatars as much as you guys think you would, because there's customers that know everything about every other competitor and about you and the product overall, and have done a ton of research. And then there's also customers who have no clue whatever they're doing right now. Okay, and the customers that have no clue what they're doing, usually there's going to be very hard to then try to kind of convert with mentioning or listing out 100 different problems that they've struggled with in the past. And so you kind of also get to test against each other a couple of different levels of how much they know about the product and overall about everything. And that is something which you gotta put a more of an eye on when it comes to your ad account audit. And then we're going to take all this research that we've gathered, so media buyer and then creative strategist, and then if you don't have these all yourself, unfortunately, and then we're going to do this right here. So this is the 80-20 rule, how I like to call it. Essentially what that means is 80% of your stuff that goes into the ad account, so your time, resources, ads, however you want to call it, your volume basically goes into iterations, right? Stuff that's already been in your ad account, or at least competitor-based stuff. And then only 20% is your unique, completely own ideas, right? Now, it's usually something completely different than 80-20. Usually it's either the fact that people are way too creative and they try to reinvent the wheel, and then they don't iterate on their own ad concepts, that they literally forget the whole ad account audit thing, and then they don't do anything in that realm. And then the other option, the other extreme, and that's also what a lot of people are doing, is they're all doing ripping content stuff and just ripping ads and not really iterating at all properly, just basically doing only competitor-based stuff. Both of these are not good. This is what's going to make you money, the 80%, and then the 20% is what's going to keep your ad account alive over the long period of time, okay? Now, when we have all this stuff in mind, then we're going to get started on making the hook test. So-called hook test, meaning image ads that look like this, right? So they have a white background, they have text on it. And so these are just 3 examples of one hook test that I've made for a beauty product, right? So you see here 3 ways to look 20 years younger right now. Thinking about Botox, do this instead. Julia Roberts looks 20 years younger than last year, and you don't, okay? So you see how these hooks are, for example, this one is unaware, this one is more solution aware because it's comparing to Botox. Once again, we have unaware. So you're gonna want to try to implement all the research that you've gathered here and make a high impact test, meaning a test which is very different from each other based off of the hooks. And so the reason why we test hooks like this, basically only spending a couple dollars in each image that we test like this, and then just look for the best click-through rates, because then that is actually what's going to basically give up the hit rates here, so that we have a lot higher hit rate on the actual creatives that we test. So this is pretty much the SOP of how we go about this. Obviously, after this, picking concepts and graphic design shouldn't be the hardest job, right? This is just the strategy behind it. This is the SOP. Hope you could learn a thing or two, right? Go ahead and write your main takeaway into the comments. Thank you so much for giving me your most important asset, which is your attention, and obviously a beautiful day.